This show is part of the Head Stuff Podcast Network.
Hello, my name is Dave Hanratty and there will be no encore. Welcome to episode 263 of the No Encore Music Podcast on the Head Stuff Podcast Network. The show is complete once again. Craig Fitzpatrick is in front of me via Zoom.
I'm back, baby. Hello. I'd like to say I'm fully recharged, shot out of a cannon, but I think that kind of energy was gone maybe by Tuesday afternoon. But I am at you're getting 80% Craig, which is a lot better than normal, so...
We are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by.
We lost Dave.
I know, straight away. It was amazing.
We've been returning, Dave.
It happened straight away. You can keep this audio in. I'm fine with it. But as soon as I threw to you, Craig, technical difficulties struck, and it was the classic thing of frozen faces on the screen, and then that kind of weird Matrix code-in noise. So I'm just like, all right, yeah. Every time that...
No, that's what I was saying. That was...
You could have been saying anything. You could have been saying
all
absolutely the most offensive, insulting stuff, and I have no idea. I'll be hearing it with the listener. So welcome back. I presume your week was fruitful and enjoyable.
Can you guess what I said? What would be a classic Craig thing to say on his return to the show?
That you moved from one room of the house to the other, hung out with the cats, watched a bit of the OC, that kind of stuff. I can't imagine there was much more than that. I went for a long walk.
I didn't really go into details because I mostly spent the week dreading the prospect of people asking me how I spent the week, which is classic lockdown. But no, I just did your classic self-deprecation, said I'm not quite fully recharged. I'm about 80%, but that's about as good as you're going to get.
Well, so. I've got 3 bars of battery.
A little gag for you. Yeah. You've got 3 bars of battery. Nice.
They call him 100% Dave on this episode. It's top 5 duets, best and worst, fitting for our reunition. I'm just making up fucking words now. Reunification sounded too formal. Like it was two countries finally coming back.
Like we're two nations that have had a horrendous war.
Reunion, I believe.
Our friendship's kind of been like a decade-long spoken word duet, maybe, has it?
It is coming up on a decade now, because I would have gone to Hot Press. Yeah, I went to Hot Press at the end of college, 2011. So, when did is that May? So we're coming up on it. It's been almost 10 years of...
I think it was July. Yeah.
I think it was July.
When I made my return.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, you came back to the office, and that's when we became friends. Maybe we need to do something. Something has to mark this very insular inside joke 10-year friendship that we have. But yeah, that's fucked, man. An entire decade. But I don't know. Maybe it's fitting, because someone who played a big part in the Hot Press office back in the day at one stage was Lana Del Rey. She didn't work there or anything, but she was certainly the topic of conversation when she broke through.
She was.
And on this episode, she will be the topic of conversation for our album review, because she's back with a brand new one. So top 5 duets, best and worst, Lana Del Rey album review later to come in the show. And it's at this point that we do our usual Patreon plug. But don't skip ahead, because next week is going to be a busy week for the show. And people who have subscribed to our Patreon on patreon.com/nooencore, where you can get bonus episodes, will be delighted to know that the 3rd episode of No Aux Chord, our Music Recommends Corner, it's a very chilled out, fun, kind of green tea infused hour that we record on the weekend, specifically in the morning, nice and early. And we'll be doing that this weekend to come out on Monday. I'm looking forward to it, man. It's gonna be fun. It's very casual vibes.
Yeah, I've got my tracksuit bottoms ironed and ready to go.
Yeah, it's all, the apparel is like the attire, all the accoutrements, and lots of music recommends. It's fun, it's enjoyable, and it can be yours at patreon.com/nooencore. Also coming out next week on the main feed. Delighted to once again enter into the realm of the track by track album breakdown. And this time around, I have recorded an interview, a nice lengthy chat with Micheál Quinn, an incredible musician, incredible guy. If you don't know who Micheál is, shame on you, but I'll tell you, he's a multi-instrumentalist. He's played drums with the likes of Enemies, Melty Brains, and is the current incredible drummer for Dermot Kennedy. If you've ever been to one of his shows and seen Micheál behind the kit, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He has just released a debut solo album, an electronica work called Colours. Go and check that out immediately, after the show, of course. But next Wednesday, on this very show, we'll be sitting down with Micheál in conversation for track by track, and here is a little snippet.
Do you know what, actually, I was, we did a gig that night, or the following night, we had to do a gig in Wichita. I think, Wichita in Kansas. And that gig was very tough. But I remember talking to some random man after it, and he just thought it was brilliant and he really enjoyed it. And I explained where I was at, because I was like, sorry, I can't really talk right now, I'm pretty upset. And I explained my auntie had passed away, and he was like, no shit. He was like, well, I can tell you she was there tonight. And whether she was or not, I don't know. But I wrote it down in a little book, and I don't know, it was, and I've kind of carried that ever since, which is why I'm okay talking about it, because I carry her very close, and she's been on all of it with me anyway, so I'm quite happy to tell people about her. I want people to know about her, because she encouraged me so much as a kid. She thought being a musician was really cool, and bands were like a really cool thing, and they were valuable and worthwhile. And it was really deeply ingrained in me that, like, oh yeah, being in a band isn't like being a waste or anything like that. It's a very important thing to do. So I like to just, it's as if I'm saying back to her, like, hey, you're just as valuable, or I don't know, I just really love her, I guess, and I want her to be part of things.
Just one of many stories that we heard from Micheál on that episode. Another great one. I enjoy doing these. Nice. If you're unfamiliar, it's basically like go through the album with the artist and talk about everything. Talk about the stories behind the songs, talk about anything that comes to mind. And with Micheál, there was so much to talk about. He's an absolute gentleman, really interesting guy, and that is out next week. Like I say, on Monday, no aux cord for patrons, patreon.com/no-encore. So 3 episodes next week. Enjoy them. But as for this one, Craig, let's jump into the news.
Hey, you heard about the good news?
All right, like Neville Chamberlain before me. Was it Neville Chamberlain, the Peace in Our Time thing? I always wonder.
It was. Well, got that one wrong, didn't you, Neville?
Sure fucking did. But I'm here to declare peace in modern times. Real quick update to a story we talked about previously. Taylor Swift and Utah amusement park Evermore have ended their legal battle and dropped their lawsuits against each other. That's according to a report in Billboard this week.
Beautiful.
There was a very, very generic quote from Taylor Swift's spokesperson just saying that there will not be any further action on this. No real reason why. I mean, I don't know if it's an out-of-court settlement or if they just made friends. But ultimately, we can move past it now. I'm very excited. It's all good.
Maybe they just realised it was kind of boring for everyone. Just like, dueling lawsuits about a weird amusement park that, like, if your amusement park aesthetic is the latest era of Taylor Swift, not that amusing, I'm going to say. It's not like it was Grimes that was nicking off them, So yeah, glad that's wrapped up.
Me too, man. I mean, ultimately, it's 2021. There's enough to worry about. But if you're looking for a distraction, well, we just might have it. Who remembers Meatloaf? Remember Meatloaf, kids? 1993 was a big year for him, with that amazing song, I'd Do Anything for Love, open brackets, but I won't do that, close brackets. A video directed by Michael Bay.
What was that?
What was what? The song.
Did we ever figure out the thing he wouldn't do? Is it not like the big, there's conspiracy theories about it, and it's like You're So Vain by Carly Simon, where it's like, oh, is it about Warren Beatty?
I presume it's...
Did he mean Warren Beatty? I don't know.
I presume it's vote Democrat because he's a big Trump guy. So it could very well have been that. But why are we talking about Meatloaf 28 years later? It's because that song in particular, which was a chart topper, it was often played in my own house. I think my parents loved it for some reason. I think they bought it on CD. And my parents weren't into music, so he got through. The song is being turned into a reality TV show. A competition, as a matter of fact. A brand new series. Meatloaf himself will serve as executive producer. And essentially, it's a show in which couples will compete in a variety of comedic physical games designed to reveal how well they can work together and how much they really trust and believe in one another, all to a soundtrack of classic hits performed live in the studio by the original artists, as well as new stars. So we're being promised, quote, absurd and sometimes frightening physical contests, inspired and accompanied by ballads. Does this sound like something that you would watch, Craig? Meatloaf attachment or not?
I'm kind of intrigued by the artist performing. I kind of like the juxtaposition of the cheesy ballads with frightening physical contests. Gives me pause. I'm slightly concerned about that, but I will maybe check out a couple of clips. It's clearly and blatantly the kind of show where they had the title. They went to Meatloaf and like, can we use this title? And then they just figured out the rest of it, probably on a napkin. during a liquid lunch over the course of an hour, I'd say.
Hey, that's how J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter. Don't know if alcohol was involved, but I believe it was written...
One lunch.
It was written on several napkins. And hey, she turned out to be a massive bigot, so good for her. In other kind of shocking news, did you see this Cardi B thing? Very Jay Leno of me.
Yeah.
You seen this?
Cardi B, who's not a massive bigot, and she's not Hitler.
Yeah.
Despite what Skillet frontman John Cooper might say.
Now, Skillet are an act I've never heard of before. They appear to be an American conservative Christian rock act, but this guy, John Cooper, has clarified his recent remarks in which he compared WAP. W-A-P? WAP? Have we settled on a pronunciation for this? Does it matter?
We settled on WAP because, we did a whole bit where I was going, is it W-A-P? And it was at a point where everyone was saying WAP, and I came off looking quite foolish.
Okay, well, someone else who looks quite foolish is in fact John Cooper, after he compared the Grammys performance with Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion of WAP to speeches by Adolf Hitler. Now, I mean, I kind of feel like in this day and age, Craig, you know, you can say things and people can get all hot and bothered, but there are some lines you just don't cross. And I think comparing a sexual music performance to the work of the worst human being of all time is a bit...
The work of his back catalogue.
Well, apparently it's his early work. It's his early speeches. The whole thing centres on the fact that apparently he was saying that this sexually charged performance is an example of the woke public mistaking evil for good, using Hitler's propaganda speeches as a historical example, saying that, quote, every dictator in history says that what they were doing was good and that people are forced to applaud the sexual degradation of Cardi B's performance. So he did a climb down. This was on his podcast as well. He did a climb down and said, it has come to my attention that some of my words were misrepresented and taken out of context. So please allow me to say I did not compare Cardi B to Hitler, did not compare her performance to him or any other dictator, and I certainly didn't compare the Grammys or the music industry or any other artist for any reason to any dictator. He tries to, say that I would never conflate the horrors of genocide to, this, that and the other. But he keeps trying to double down on it. And I think ultimately, if you find yourself in a position where you have to say out loud, I wasn't comparing that musical performance to Hitler, when you did, by the way, you're kind of...
But also in his explanation, he kind of says, I wasn't talking about Hitler, but I was talking about confusing good for evil. So he's still calling the performance inherently evil. So, you know what I mean? Just because he invokes Hitler doesn't change the message. Some kind of weird Christian rock dude. I will just say, I'm a bit sad that we can no longer invoke Hitler as their really extreme comparison points. That was always kind of like an easy reach, wasn't it, for an argument? Just like bloody Hitler. And now that's off the table as well.
I kind of feel like ultimately this is one that we can let go, I mean, I
don't know. Yeah, maybe it's not the hill I'm going to die on.
I think everything is contextual. And I think ultimately, something like this, and I think WAP is not a great song. It's clearly a very good zeitgeist moment and fair play, but as a song...
But it's not like wet-ass propaganda, for example.
Good Lord. Okay. Why don't you take up the rest of the news section? And I should stress at this point, by the way, that we're completely on Cardi B's side. This guy's a fucking idiot. But
100%, yeah. Ludicrous. He might have a point about the actual institution of the Grammys. Slightly dictatorship maybe possibly, but yes, we're on Cardi B's
tear
side.
It down. But he wouldn't be the first rock star out there to do something outlandish, and even in death some rock stars can do crazy things, like Lemmy from Motorhead, who died 6 years ago, I believe, 5 or 6 years ago at this stage. Yes. Apparently it's come out before, but it's been kind of reiterated this week that his ashes were put into bullets with Lemmy written on them and have been sent out to individuals. Now, I should say, when I say sent out to individuals, this isn't like
not as a threat.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't like that
for Beyond the
that
Grave
scene in The Insider when Russell Crowe goes out to his mailbox and there's a bullet in there. This is more like been sent to trusted individuals and friends. There was a thing a few months ago where the tennis player Pat Cash put up an Instagram post of him with one of these bullets, and I was like, Pat Cash got one? What the fuck? Turns out it wasn't his. It was the singer from Ugly Kid Joe who he was having a drink with, and I'm like, yeah, that makes a bit more sense. But the someone who hosted the Headbangers Ball in MTV back in the day,
Ricky Rockman. Put some respect on his name.
I don't know who this. I don't know who this.
Either. No.
Would you believe that of all things, I never watched Headbangers Ball? I was just I don't know. I think it might have been before my time.
It's kind of before our time, right?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it's definitely very early 90s alt MTV. But he put up a thing this week a photograph of one of the bullets and said that he received it on that day and was literally brought to tears. And I'm like, you received it only then? He died 5 years ago. What kind of process is this?
Brexit, mate.
It could be that.
Just the delivery services all over the place.
Do you want to give us a quick update about your
imagine being... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Your jazz vinyl. I know you're very sad about that. People have been waiting.
I was talking to yourself and Adam pre-show about the situation, and the situation is that there is no longer a situation. I've been sadly refunded because DPD, do not use them whatsoever, sent back the vinyl to a store in the UK, and it was damaged. They were like, in good conscience, we can't send this back out to you because the vinyl's ruined. So congratulations to the sorting centre in Athlone, who like lost the package for about 2 months, didn't respond to any of my queries, and then sent it back to the UK damaged. Great job, guys. Great job. No jazz vinyl for Craig.
Maybe they'll send you one of these bullets by way of compensation or something. Would you want one?
Are you a little bit pleased that I don't have like 7 new jazz albums to talk about on No Aux Chord for the next 3-4 months?
Nah, please is the wrong word. That'd be cruel. I think ultimately, as someone who has become totally addicted to vinyl, as we know, to the point where I have several more arriving this week. I understand the rush of getting them in the post and the annoyance but you have the worst luck. Like by comparison to me, it's usually fairly quick and clean, you know? No major delays. But if you try and get anything, Frank Ocean, J. Paul, strange vinyl, it's just not happening.
Yeah, maybe it's a sign. I don't know. Maybe I need to move on and start buying mini discs or something.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think so.
If you would you be up for this bullet thing? After you pass, do you think it's a cool idea? Because I like the way he thought it through. There is something very nice about it, but he probably didn't envisage like Pat Cash would end up handling him.
That would upset me,
which is always a risk.
Yeah, and then of course you have the thing of like, what if they're like the bad guys from The Crow, and they, to show you how tough they are, they do tequila shots and take the bullet into their mouth with it. I'm like, is that going to happen? Yeah, I just feel like, it's maybe when I was a teenager I would have thought this was cool and edgy and stuff, but like, at the same time, it would be very strange if I was still around the earth in the form of a bullet, having never held a gun in my life. I mean, like,
maybe a piece of vinyl. You can do that now. You can get ashes turned into a vinyl record.
Really?
Yeah, you can go online. There's a proper service. It's a legit thing. I'm not sure how good the quality is. Probably not great. You probably don't want to play it too much.
How about
you can do it.
How about I'll do that, right? And you can order it, and it will arrive approximately 24 months after you do so. But it'll be really touching when it does. So it'll be good stuff. Speaking of good stuff...
Will it arrive damaged, is the question.
Well, listen, it's me. So I already am, pal. But yeah, so here's the thing, right? Sting is our big inspiration this week. Craig was taking a drink of water and lost it. I love it. Because I went full...
Oh my God, what timing. Here's the thing, Sting...
Did you see, Higgs told me this, I had to look it up. Did you see Jack Wilshere was a pundit recently on some football match, and there was like a penalty claim, and they went to Jack Wilshere and asked him what he thought, and he said, for me, not for me. I was just like, so good.
That's kind of profound somehow, isn't it?
It's incredible.
Like, there's something kind of like, it's like a Beckett player or
like
something.
Jackson Pollock sentence. Yeah, he just found the genius in the madness. But someone who has often found genius in madness, I'm determined to link this, and I'm going to keep doing it. Sting, our top 5 inspiration this week, who's just put out a duets album, has been speaking up. Your standard kind of promotional interview, I suppose. And he said that he regrets reforming the police back in 2007, calling it, quote, an exercise in nostalgia. No shit, pal.
A reunion tour?
A reunification tour with the police. The 69-year-old singer embarked on a world tour in 2018 after he reunited with bandmates Andy Summers and Stuart Copeland. Or maybe it was 2017. Maybe I got my numbers wrong here. But he just said, at the time, I labelled the tour an exercise in nostalgia. It was simply how I felt, and it's still how I feel today. I think it's okay to be honest about your feelings, and that's the way it went for me. That's nice. Growth. Not a slight on the people I was with, or the way that things panned out. It's just how I saw it by the end, and let's be honest, that's not how I wanted to remember it. If I thought that would be the emotion I'd be leaving with, I wouldn't have done it in the first place. So, I mean, it's easy to say that now. After you've done
after he's cashed all his checks
money
from
grab,
it, yeah.
So
I do like the fact he was speaking to Reader's Digest, which is like most definitely an exercise in nostalgia. Reader's Digest is still going, and of course they're talking to Sting. I guess he was the cover star.
I'd say he was. Does that still come in like tiny book form? I hope it does.
I'd say so. I got a load of those from like my granddad back in my teens. I remember reading a few of them. They're probably still in an attic somewhere.
There you go.
But
That'll
yeah,
keep
they
you
were
going
like
instead
that
of the
small...
vinyl, you know? Just crack into an old RD.
Do you remember that reunion tour though?
No.
Do you remember like the first night or like one of the first shows? Stuart Copeland took to his blog and started doing like reviews of every show, but like as a proper music critic, and was just like slamming the gigs. He was like, "We're horrendous. I don't know why people came to the show." And he starts talking about Sting like he was calling him like a preening frontman and just laying into him like opening night.
It's incredible. I did not know this.
So I'm surprised Sting has such kind of regrets. Not at all.
This is brilliant. Like, that's actually something that everyone should do. There should be a designated member of the band whose job it is to keep a blog and just go all in night after night after night.
Would it put us out of business though?
I mean, business could be booming, you know, a bit more. Patreon.com/NoEncore if you want to help us out. But I don't know, like, Stuart Copeland's probably good at it, but he's not us, Craig, you know. He couldn't, for example, review another Lana Del Rey album if it came out on the 1st of June, which is apparently what is happening. We will be talking about...
we're doing that, are we?
I don't know. I mean, like, we'll see how this one goes, because she has just released Chemtrails Over the Country Club, which we'll be reviewing in approximately 2 or 3 minutes, but she's already announced a follow-up album called Rock Candy Sweet, which, as I note, comes out at the start of June, and she is taking aim at the critics on this one, Craig. Very exciting.
Yeah, so along with the announcement, she responded to a Harper's Bazaar article, probably within her rights to respond, because the article was called "Lana Del Rey Can't Qualify Her Way Out of Being Held Accountable." I haven't read the article, but she said, just want to say thank you again for the kind articles like this one, and for reminding me that my career was built on cultural appropriation and glamorizing domestic abuse. I will continue to challenge those thoughts on my next record, June 1st, titled Rock Candy Sweet. What an announcement. I wonder, is there actually an album, or was it just like a really good mic drop? I don't know. It's interesting.
It's a pretty good mic drop.
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, like, she's getting used to having to come out with these kind of statements, because there's been a lot of controversies around her of late, sort of the whole kind of mesh mask. I guess we'll talk about it all. It turned out that mesh mask wasn't just pure mesh, by the way, and that's a bit of a tongue twister, but she had clear plastic underneath. It was all safe and above board.
I'm glad you've checked this out for us. I do appreciate it. You're doing a better job than some people in the old Irish government at this stage, Craig. Fair play to you. She also followed up though and said that, you know, critics will be right that it would have been unnecessary for her if no one had significantly criticised everything about the album to begin with, but you did, and I want revenge. So it's like, are we getting an album of Lana versus journalists? Because I'd be up for that. But instead,
like when the Stereophonics released Mr. Writer,
Craig, it's their best song. It's their best song. Like, for so many reasons. It's a complete mess.
Local Boy in a Photograph is their best song.
That's also a good song.
Yeah, it's a bit of a
do they have 5 good songs, Stereophonics?
Might be pushing it,
well,
mate.
Who knows? Could be a top 5
could
someday.
probably get to 3. Could we get a third? Dakota?
Bartender and the Thief.
Like Sex on Fire, as Johnny Burrell pointed out.
Bartender and the Thief is a good song, is it?
Yeah, there we go. We'll give them 3.
So Mr. Rider, Bartender and the Thief, and
Local Boy in a
Photograph, which is a great song. Superman's okay, I suppose. We should probably review the Lana Del Rey album instead, though. Let's do that. But before that, as ever, a plug for another show on the Head Stuff Podcast Network.
Hello, I'm Emma Jane from Fail Harder, the podcast that chats to people at the top of their game about failure, from their first memory of failure to how they cope with it now. I have some unbelievable guests on the show, like Paul Mescal, James Kavanagh, Georgina Campbell. The list just goes on. And of course, we'd be mad to take failure too seriously, so every week I have 20 questions in front of me, numbered at random. Most are straightforward, however some are a little more unconventional, and in the spirit of failure, my guest can pick the numbers. They might not like the results, but life's not fair, and neither is my podcast.
But will Lana Del Rey fail? We're going to find out. The new album is called Chemtrails Over the Country Club. Here is the opening track. It's called White Dress.
Just working the night shift, you were my man. Felt like I got this. Down at the Minute Music Business Conference, down in Orlando, I was only 19. Down at the Minute Music Business Conference, I only mention it cause it was such a scene, and I felt seen.
That's White Dress by Lana Del Rey, and that's quite a high register. Craig, as ever, primer time, but here's my little twist for you this time. Who is Lana Del Rey in 2021 specifically?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I might take some time getting to it because she's the former Lizzie Grant. I guess she's still Lizzie Grant. She's a songwriter from New York, which is still true. And yeah, she created Lana Del Rey, who's become this slightly different thing in 2021, I think. It took off, as you were saying, about a decade ago. She's now, I guess, winning acclaim from the kind of broadsheets and music press that were a bit tentative about her to begin with, but also, as we've heard, criticism kind of equal measure, some outrage, which is intriguing really, because when you boil it all down, she's quite a traditional singer-songwriter. Like Mojo have had her on the cover for this album, which is her 7th, and they like included a line in the piece about Joan Baez like advocating her acceptance in the pantheon. So basically getting like the bootcut gene subscribers to Mojo on board if they weren't already. That's quite a contrast to 2011. And I did unearth a piece from around then where the title was Meet Lana Del Rey, the corporate engineered gangster Nancy Sinatra who has the music community up in arms. And the vibes from that piece was basically like the hive-minded Interscope worked with Lizzie Grant to create this Lana Del Rey character who's like the musical equivalent of a smoke-filled room, and just talking quite a lot about this cocktail of like submissive sex object and mid-20th century American vamp, which I don't know, at the time was probably a bit of a sexist point of view. She's still being dragged over that kind of persona, which she says isn't a persona, from a feminist point of view now, which is interesting. I immediately took to video games on the recommendation at the time of I think Hot Press's Selena Murphy. I know you didn't take to it at the time, it's just a matter of taste. There was a kind of rock press sneer elsewhere that kind of weirdly focused on her persona, despite the fact that like plenty of their own like 60s and 70s heroes didn't, you know, as if they didn't do exactly that. Born to Die was the parent album, which was their second. I think the first one was like a self-titled digital release that was quickly kind of withdrawn. But yeah, I kind of loved the Americanized trip hop of that. There were some big songs on it. She then kind of went slightly shtickier and guitar heavy with Ultraviolence. There was, you know, songs in Baz Luhrmann's Gatsby retelling. I only really checked back in on the third record, which is Honeymoon, which was more kind of baroque pop, and it was a big Billboard success. She was all the while kind of accruing this quite hardcore stan base, which still remains today. The big breakthrough creatively for me, I think, was Lust for Life in 2017. We reviewed it on this show, and bar some kind of awkward hip-hop excursions, I guess the ambition of it really got to me. She was kind of engaging with modern America. The throwback influences were kind of creating this interesting link to 60s protest stuff, like a Laurel Canyon Redux vibe. You know, she had a song on it called Coachella Woodstock in my mind, which I think only she as an artist could make intriguing and enthralling rather than just obnoxious. And the songs were top tier. And then the world caught up with me on Norman fucking Rockwell, and yourself. You did like Lust for Life as well. In fairness, that was maybe the culmination of this like incisive pop culture approach. It was really like a capture of the zeitgeist, maybe. It was State of the Union stuff. It was really vivid and vibrant and on point, and there was a great balance of like strong pop songs and experimental sonics. It was in our top 5 when it came to the year-end list. That was 2 years ago. It didn't seem likely back in 2011 that Lana Del Rey on that album would be singing about like Kanye West being blonde and gone, I think the term was, which was really chiming with the public mood, and music critics were nodding sagely along and like, thank God we've got Lana here, which is, you know, what a difference a decade makes. A lot's happened since then. We had the very ropey Charlie's Angels single, which we discussed on this show as well. Wasn't great. There was a spoken word album. Haven't heard it. She heavily influenced at least one Taylor Swift album, if not like an entire Taylor Swift era. And yeah, there's been lots of, I guess, Kanye-esque art as well. She's a polarizing character, I guess. Didn't seem to be a problem for her fan base when I saw her in Malahide a couple of summers ago. And yeah, it was a pretty incredible reaction. I think maybe apart from Kanye and Jay-Z in the Tree Arena, I haven't seen an audience react in that way where it just made me go, okay, this is what like Beatlemania must have been like. It was that like ear-splitting reaction to every song, which was just like, I was like, okay, now I get why the Beatles had to give up touring in 66 because they couldn't hear themselves. And yeah, it was, you know, Gen Z people that were like probably were in primary school when video games came out, and, you know, didn't really care about the controversy at the time because they were, I don't know, learning recorder in school. And she was just kind of really like indulging in the moment. It was well earned. She was a lot kind of more calm and collected and commanding than she was in like early performances on TV. And, you know, people would kind of question, I think, her Vicar Street show, where, you know, she wasn't quite up to par, and she was quite a nervous performer, but she was just like the real deal there. So it felt like this album would then be almost like the victory lap. The working title was White Hot Forever. The title in the end is great as well. I really like it. Is there enough evidence in this album, Dave, that she will indeed be white hot forever? Or maybe white not forever?
Wow.
What was your take on it?
On this album in particular, more in the latter camp there. But not in any kind of egregious degree. And it should be noted as well from my own point of view that I do think Norman fucking Rockwell is a great record. It might never be fair to go back, you know, to the previous album of any artist putting out a new one and do a direct compare and contrast everything. You know, I mean, the career cannot of course, the entire discography can be looked at as one big piece when it's all done, or before then perhaps, but also, you know, I think an album, much like a film, much like a song, should be allowed to kind of live and breathe on its own terms, and this album certainly does. But I did find myself at one stage throwing on Norman fucking Rockwell for the first time on vinyl, I might add, by the way, which was very enjoyable. And I was like, first time I've heard it in a long time. It's a long album, and it's an album that we really liked on the show. It was in our top 5 at the end of 2019. If I recall correctly, Dahi was having none of it, I think. I think you and I were fighting quite hard for it. I think he was very much not up for it at all. I
mean, he was polite and complimentary, but he didn't think it was the record of the year or anything.
Yeah, I think that's how it went down. But ultimately, if you do a direct compare and contrast with both albums, I think this one falls down quite a bit. And I wonder if, like, that's, again, I don't know if that's fair, but I think she set a very high point on that record. It is excellent. This one isn't. This one's okay. It starts off very well. I think the first 3 tracks in particular, White Dress, the title track, and Tulsa Jesus Freak, in which she takes us to a place called Arkansas, which I think is near Arkansas. But ultimately...
Oh man.
And even in White Dress, she's name dropping White Stripes and Kings of Leon, which is kind of funny. But I don't know. It lost me quickly, this one, I think. And the more the week went on, the less I wanted to return to it. The more it hit the midpoint, I was like, fuck, I'm gonna just say it, aren't I? It's just another Lana Del Rey album. It's kind of where I was at with it. The goodwill and the magic that she kind of captured on the last one, and the kind of, you know, turning a critic like me around who still thinks Video Games is a crazy overrated song all these years on. I don't know. I mean, like, outside of her, you know, social media outbursts on occasion that I just... which are so often like preventative. you're kind of like, Lana, what are you doing? You're creating this controversy to give out about it, and then making it a big problem, and setting your fans on critics, and just talking about representation when, you know, no one's really coming at you, but you're just like, I don't know. So, and listen, she can do what she wants. It's her life. It's her Twitter account, whatever. But like, ultimately, I keep saying ultimately, which I often say when I'm kind of stalling for a point. I don't think I have a point, because I'm not sure this record does. Is it just me, or is it just like, this is fine? It's what I come to expect of her, but it's certainly in the lower reaches. It's I don't know. I don't quite know what it's trying to say, if it's trying to say anything. And I do think that in comparison to much better written songs, it's a curious thing to put out, especially if there's another album coming in less than 3 months.
I know, so quickly. My sister is a bigger Lana fan than me. And both of us, I guess, and got to this one first, and we were talking about it, and she was kind of underwhelmed, and she kind of midweek opined half jokingly that, like, maybe we were wrong to praise her so much on the last couple of records, because this feels like a bit of an indulgence, which is maybe a bit of a dark thing. It's like you withhold praise from Lana and she'll do her best work. But I think, you know, the notion that this might be some form of coasting. There are stretches on this record where, as I was listening to it, that seemed like a good summation for sure. I mean, those stretches even if they're not top tier, like I'm happily 8 or 9 listens in and it goes down easy. And, you know, Jack Antonoff is back on board. He's everywhere at the moment, as I've said quite a bit on this show. I don't think he is going to be part of like the boundary pushing future of Lana Del Rey's music, but I do think they conjure up a kind of gorgeous sound, and it's a very Lana sound. Like, she's completely trademarked that at this point. She's not really trend chasing. There's no real kind of modernism, but she's not really doing the faux retro chic stuff that kind of got people's backs up initially. It's sturdy, it's tasteful, it's kind of timeless. I was reading an interview she did with Antonoff back in September for Interview Magazine. It was just like a Q&A between the two of them. It was a bit cutesy, but there was some kind of interesting bits in it. And she was talking about her like devotion to melody first. You know, a record can be really revealing and have great ideas, but if the songs aren't there, she doesn't want to know. I think that kind of knack for melody sees her through, even if they're not like her absolute best. I do think she has earned a lot of good kind of will on, you know, for that world building knack she also has. This kind of creative, if not a persona, then like the creative kind of universe that she has, where she kind of lifts kind of musically ordinary material out of that and keeps you engaged. I do think she's a great storyteller. I agree. I think the start of the record is very good. I think she bookends it well as well. Like, I liked that idea of like the strained, you know, wild falsetto on White Dress, where she's reliving being 19 and like listening to White Stripes and Kings of Leon, and then aligning it at the other end with like, you know, listing off other kind of musical greats that might have appeared in like those women in music lists in Q magazine years ago. And then, you know, covering Joni Mitchell at the end, after having just in the preceding song said she's going to do it. Just some nice kind of meta tags. I think it's quite clever. It kind of brings it full circle. But yeah, in between all of that, I don't know if there's much of a narrative. I don't know if there is much of a point. And yeah, I do think her kind of archetype it still feels refreshing at this point, right? Because she's got that weird juxtaposition of unabashed privilege and throwback stuff, but also doing social commentary. And weirdly, I think Lana Del Rey, in quote marks, seems kind of far from performative now at this point, when you cast it against like the weird like performative authenticity we see kind of everywhere else of people trying to convince everyone else that they're squeaky clean and on point and on message. I think that she leaves that room for like a bit of chaos and intrigue in her art. You know, that messiness that really lifts stuff. I think it's way more mannered here, though. I don't think there's so much of that. There's highlights for sure. Tulsa Jesus Freak, as you say, like that thing of the Arkansas mispronunciation. That's kind of like a case in point of like, I can't figure out if she means to do it, and I can't figure out if it irritates me or I think it's a small bit of genius. And that's kind of her at her best. She's almost like that kind of, you know, friend that you like meeting up with because you disagree with them quite a bit, and there's that frisson there. I think there's some elements of that to her music, and there's kind of moments of it here. But overall, in terms of a musical product and like cast against the last couple of records, there's definite regression. It's a bit more plodding, it's a bit blander. I think the intricacies and the kind of insights and small details of the last few aren't there. And in that Interview Magazine chat with Jack Antonoff, he says like it's kind of crazy how quickly we did this album, and I was thinking it must have been so easy for you. And she says, I was actually thinking how different it's been making this one because of how I've been distracted by poetry this year, the spoken word album she put out. She said she was really stressed about the album because with Norman fucking Rockwell, she knew exactly what it was before she even went into it. She had the whole concept. And she says with Chemtrails, she's kind of like, is this new folk? Oh God, are we going country? And there's definitely evidence that she saved maybe some of her better lines for the poetry, I think, for sure. Like the likes of Let Me Love You Like a Woman, Not All Who Wander Are Lost. Like if she's going country, it feels like country cliche. It feels very like live, laugh, love at times, which she's so far above and beyond that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's not the intrigue, there's not the depth, there's not the weirdness. It comes through in patches, but like, yeah, I don't know. I think like this is definitely her having accomplished quite a lot, you know, sitting back and admiring the view and just kind of taking stock. I think there'll be kind of fresh vistas to conquer. I don't know if she's going to conquer those on the next album, if it's in June. Like she still might be on her holidays. We shall see. But yeah, judging against her body of work and what she's, you know, trying to accomplish, this screams 6 out of 10 for me.
On the mispronunciation thing, the Arkansas thing, I'm confident and certain that it's deliberate. I think she wears that kind of stuff well. To echo something else that you said, I feel like I'd long shaken off my kind of snobbiness or whatever, my cynicism with regards to the idea of the character of Lana Del Rey. I think if anything over the past 10 years, and certainly in the last few years, she has firmly established it as being a viable, you know, kind of creation, and that's fine. However, I think she desperately needs some new lines. This is a 5.5 out of 10. I should note before we move on the subject of new albums, as of this podcast dropping, I'm sure everyone who listens to the show is aware of this, but just in case you're not for whatever reason, For Those I Love's debut album is finally out in the world. It's an album that we've been talking about forever on this show, first surfaced 2 years ago, and it's finally here. So if you've somehow managed to listen to us first, I will understand if you knock us off immediately.
Of course, you're only human.
And go and check that out, because it's an exceptional piece of work, and congratulations to David Balfe on the release. It's an amazing
I just saw it got a great review in The Guardian from our boy, or maybe my boy, Alexis Petridis, which is always good to see.
Quality, man.
And well deserved.
Yeah, absolutely. So, at this point, it is time for our usual traditional top 5. It's best and worst duets. Will we go as far as South America? I don't know. Craig, how you feeling about this one?
I'm feeling good. There was a lot to pick from. My problem was steering clear of maybe stuff we'd referenced before, because we've talked about a lot of absolute trash over the last year or so. But I cut it down. I think the perimeters were good. Duets being, you know, kind of co-billing, or at least like an equal share in the creative process and share of the work. We didn't want to just do like a tacked on kind of rap verse on a pop song, which is kind of everywhere. That's like shooting fish in a barrel. And yeah, I'm really intrigued to hear your favourites, because there's a lot of good duets out there as well. So yeah, I'm intrigued. How did you find it?
Mostly good in terms of like I didn't struggle too much or nothing, and yeah, like for me it was very for me it was very much a case of I wanted the songs to justify the idea of a duet. I wanted there to be equal kind of sharing of the microphone, not just here's a verse and they're never heard from again, or here's, you know, a quick feature. I'm pretty happy with my top 5, but you know, in order to finish on a high, you have to go first because you're on worst.
Okay. All right. I will say this is only number 5 because it's not a duet between two full-time music industry professionals. It's two entertainment professionals, so there's questions still to be asked. It's definitely a duet, right? This one is the only one that I think might be slightly stretching it, but I'm going Maverick slightly after my week off. I pulled the clip and I was kind of humming and hawing, and it got worse with every listen. It's hilarious cringe. It's beyond like belief. I need to share it. I need to unload. So here's just under a minute of the 11 minutes that ruined Hollywood producer Alan Carr's career forever.
Big fan of yours, Snow, but you know, there's so much I'd like to know about you.
Used to work a lot for Walt Disney, starring in cartoons every night and day.
But you said goodbye to Grumpy and Sleepy, left the dwarves behind, came to town to stay.
Big lights keep on burning, cameras keep on turning. Ooh, rolling, rolling, keep the cameras rolling. Rolling, rolling, keep the cameras rolling.
Keep the cameras rolling.
Oh, keep the cameras rolling. Or don't. Rob Lowe there, if you couldn't tell from the out-of-tune performance. Getting to know Snow White a little better. Snow White being played by Eileen Bowman, who was not to blame for any of this. That was the zany opening number from the Oscars years ago, still seen as maybe the worst Oscars moment ever, maybe worse than announcing the wrong best film. That bad. It was 1989. Buckaroo. First of all, a duet of Proud Mary in any context. Is there anything worse? It's just like, it might be the urtext, David, when it comes to awful karaoke staples. It's obviously parodied here, but not in a way that's at all funny, and It kind of sunk Rob Lowe for a little bit as well. It was the end of his amazing 80s. It was a dark time.
I think you'll find a significantly more grim legal issue sunk him for a while, but this is probably didn't help him. Yeah, I'd imagine so. Noted NFL fan, though.
Definitely didn't help.
Big Rob Lowe.
Pardon?
Noted NFL fan, of course, you know. Remember that photograph of him in the game where he's just wearing a hat that says NFL?
I think he's a big sports fan in general. Yeah. Obviously, you know, his career recovered and he's the lovable Rob Lowe now, and a lot of time has passed. People do need to see, I think, the video for this where Rob Lowe is playing Prince Charming and he's trying to give it socks, but my God, it's just like he's already tapped out, so he's kind of trying to look a bit aloof and he just comes off smug. The video contains great like reaction shots. There's a brilliant shot of like a clearly quite sozzled Robert Downey Jr. just looking like sinking into a seat, being like, what the fuck am I watching? I know this man and he's sinking his career. And like Rob Lowe's been a good sport about it since. There was a New York Times piece a couple of years ago where they asked him about it. He's constantly asked about it. And he said it's fitting and proper that we continue to honour the dark and tragic event that befell our nation 30 years later. I'm particularly looking forward to the candlelight vigils. He said the moment he knew it was going south, he knew in rehearsals. He was only doing it because he was a fan of Marvin Hamlish, it was the composer working on it. But he looked out in the middle of the performance and saw Barry Levinson, who directed Rain Man, I think, that year. And Barry Levinson was just looking at what was happening. And Rob Lowe said, I could see him very clearly like pop-eyed and mouthing, what the fuck? And Rob Lowe was like, well, there's my chance of ever featuring in a Barry Levinson film gone. He says he realised quite quickly it was a huge mistake. There was actually a piece that's worth reading where I think it was the Hollywood Reporter found Eileen Bowman, who played Snow White, and that was about all she did, but it was interesting to see like her experience. And yeah, the performance isn't great. That high-pitched chirp isn't really funny, but she like kind of nails it. She's in tune, which you can't say for Rob Lowe. And yeah, she says basically she said she like fell off the turnip truck from San Diego. So yeah, I think she means she's like a country bumpkin. San Diego, I thought that was pretty cosmopolitan. I don't know.
The Coronas,
she landed in LA,
like, painted a picture of.
Yeah, maybe did the Coronas lie to us all these years?
I don't even want to consider that, man.
Yeah, so she was a young actor. She thought she was auditioning for this film called Beach Blanket Babylon at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and she did her piece. Then they put her in the Snow White outfit, and they put her in a like a limo with another actor who was also dressed as Snow White. And she said she was basically a hostage to Hollywood at this point, having just arrived. Her first stop was Alan Carr's house, who was the producer. And she says she remembered his swimming pool had pink water in it. He had a 30-foot Oscar outside his door, and he auditioned us in a robe, which is horrifying. Then they went to Hamlish's office. She got the part, and some dude called Steve Silver was like, okay, you've got the job. Do you know what this is for? And she was like, yeah, Beach Blanket Babylon. And he said, no, honey, this is for the Oscars.
Jesus Christ.
She got paid scale, so like $350 a week. Rob Lowe, who was playing Prince Charming, took her side during dress rehearsal and like gave her a warning and was like looking out for her and was like, you need to be careful, there's sharks in these waters, you have to be really careful who you work with after this. He was like freaked out by this, what was going to happen. He'd never sung before and he was kind of insecure, and he was just like, okay, we're both fucked. And yeah, she said she just remembers lots of kind of sympathetic actors and actresses in the audience just kind of going, like Martin Landau was just kind of in the audience being like, don't worry, everything's fine, it's going grand. Tom Hanks was quite nice. And she basically left Hollywood thereafter, and she's still acting, and she's back in San Diego, and she's got a great story, but this is not a great duet.
Yeah, no argument from me, Craig. So Positivity Corner is where I find myself this week for the best duets, and we'll go from grim, sunny Hollywood to rainy, inspirational Seattle for my number 5. Why, yes, it is, of course, Temple of the Dog. You heard Eddie Vedder there and Chris Cornell. They teamed up for this super group. This song is called Hunger Strike. And Craig did a little celebration there when that came in. Were you expecting this one on my list, Craig?
I wouldn't have been expecting it a couple of weeks ago, but one of those weird kind of moments of serendipity, I just stumbled back upon this song maybe a week or so ago, and I was like, oh my god, yes, this is an absolute classic. I was always maybe slightly the Nirvana camp in terms of the whole grunge movement, and I wouldn't know the back catalogues of these guys extensively, but this song is an absolute belter.
Yeah, it's great. I was a Pearl Jam guy, and ultimately, there's that word again. So with this one, like, it's weird, like with the top fives, like we don't always necessarily like, you know, rigidly be like, this is the fifth best, but I will say that like all day it's been bothering me, and even just based on your reaction, I was like, yeah, no, this should be higher in my list. It's an amazing song, but it doesn't matter, it's here, and that's the most important thing. This was a one-off project. There was only ever one album, and it was a tribute, essentially, by Chris Cornell to the late Andrew Wood, who was the lead singer of Mother Love Bone, who passed away, I think, at the age of 24 following a heroin overdose. The lineup on this project included Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament. Both were in Mother Love Bone and would later move on to Pearl Jam, who I think at the time were called Mookie Blaylock. Eddie Vedder was there, Matt Cameron, Soundgarden, and later Pearl Jam, and Mike McCready, also later Pearl Jam. So it's kind of like, you know, it's still early days. Like, this is like 1990, 1991. And as a matter of fact, like, I mean, in terms of this track coming together, it's one of those classic almost didn't happen kind of stories where Chris Cornell had said that like the album was almost done. Apparently it was 9 tracks long, and he doesn't like odd numbers, so he wanted one more song. This was the song that made it on, if that's true. It could be apocryphal. But Chris Cornell said, when we started rehearsing the songs, I pulled out Hunger Strike, and I had this feeling that it was going to just kind of be filler. It didn't feel like a real song. Eddie was sitting there kind of waiting for a rehearsal with his band, and I was singing parts, and Eddie kind of humbly, but with some balls, walked up to the mic and started singing the low parts for me because he saw it was kind of hard. We got through a couple of choruses of him doing that, and suddenly the light bulb came on in my head. This guy's voice is amazing for these parts. History wrote itself after that, and it became the single. Eddie Vedder recalls a similar story. He said, it was during the same week that I was up there in Seattle rehearsing with the band. Day 4, maybe day 5, they did a Temple of the Dog rehearsal after ours. I got to watch these songs, watch how Chris was working, and watch Matt Cameron play the drums. It got to Hunger Strike. I was sitting in the corner putting duct tape on a little African drum. About 2/3 of the way through, he was having to cut off the one line and start the other. I'm not now, and I certainly wasn't then, self-assured or cocky, but I could hear what he was trying to do. So I walked up to the microphone, which I'm really surprised that I did, and I sang the other part, Going Hungry, Going Hungry. The next time I was up, he asked me if I'd record it. So it was just me and Chris in the same studio that they would later make Pearl Jam's 10 record in. I really like hearing that song. I feel like I could be really proud of it because 1, I didn't write it, and 2, it was such a nice way to be ushered onto vinyl for the first time. I'm indebted to Chris for being invited onto that track. It was the first time I ever heard myself on a real record. It could be one of my most favourite songs I've ever been on, or the most meaningful. And it's like, in terms of duet, like, I mean, it's interesting because it's basically like each guy doing the same verse and then kind of overlapping each other. It's very simple, but it works absolutely beautifully. You could probably make the argument that Vedder dominates the song in terms of that, like that low kind of Eddie Vedder baritone. He takes the second verse.
His arrival is a big moment.
It really,
so
really
cool.
is.
Every time you hear it, you're like,
it's
yeah!
great. Yeah, it does feel like it feels like they're kind of like giving each other a high five or something. And then by the end of it, you've got Cornell's kind of vocal, like, you know, reaching for the heavens, and it's just a beautiful union. It's a beautiful moment in grunge, in music in general, and obviously, you know, it was meant to be for one of their kind of fallen brothers, and in that regard it works perfectly. It's so of its time, it's incredibly straightforward, and yeah, I hadn't heard it in forever either, and then when I got to it again this week for a while, I listened to it a few weeks ago. I considered it for a previous top 5 we did, and I was talking to a good friend of the show, Carla Monaco, who is a huge fucking fan of Chris Cornell and Eddie Vedder and all that. And yeah, I know, like, it's kind of, this is like a really sacred song for people who are into those bands, and I think it holds up really, really well 30 years on. It's fucking beautiful.
I love the background detail there you gave us. It kind of left me feeling warm and fuzzy. Actually, Carlo sent me a clip recently enough of an anecdote Tom Morello had. I think it was on Howard Stern or something, but he was talking about when Audio Slave was come together. Have you seen that clip? It's amazing. So basically, It was Tom Morello and the Rage guys trying to figure something out, get a singer in, start a project. They wanted Chris, and they were working with our boy Rick Rubin to make something happen. So they set up a meeting with Chris Cornell to kind of hash it out, see if there was any potential in a collaboration. And Tom Morello's like, Rick Rubin was clearly mad into it because like he got into my car, and at the time like Rick Rubin was traveling around in limousines within limousines, but he got in my crappy car to go and visit Chris Cornell, he says, on the last lonely mansion in LA. So they drive outright and they're faced with this like dark gothic mansion that Chris Cornell was like living in at the time. They both get out of the car, and as they're approaching the place, like the doors, the big huge front doors just kind of swing open by themselves like there's something supernatural going on. And Chris Cornell just comes out like as if he's Dracula, just fully dressed up, moving like really slowly and kind of dramatically, and not like kind of showing any emotion whatsoever, not being like, oh hey guys, come on in, we'll have a few beers and like we'll get to work. And Tom Morello says Rick Rubin just turned to him and goes, let's get the fuck out of here. It was like, which is sensational. But they went inside and became like massively good friends, obviously, and Audioslave had some belters as well. Just I love
think
that story.
I would say, before we move on, I'd say real quick, I think that first Audioslave record is a lot better than people give it credit for. I think it's aged very, very well.
Oh, for sure.
And as always, rest in peace, Chris Cornell.
Yeah, here. Okay, let's go to The Bad Place again. A lot more musical prestige on display with this next one, which kind of adds to the awful. Here's two of pop music's good guys again, which is probably part of the problem.
Ebony and ivory live together in perfect harmony, side by side on my piano keyboard. Oh Lord, why don't we? We all know that people are the same wherever.
Ebony and Ivory from Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder, and it's just so incredibly saccharine. Saccharine doesn't really cut it. I kind of like a lot of boomer legends. I think Paul and Stevie didn't really have a good 80s creatively. Stevie was actually hitting kind of commercial highs. He did, I Just Called to Say I Love You. He was really lowering himself to Lionel Richie levels, sadly. That's a bit harsh on Lionel Richie. Apparently he's a lovely bloke. My aunt says he's a lovely bloke.
Stick the boot in, Craig.
But this was just obviously well-intentioned. And it got subsequently banned in South Africa during apartheid because Stevie dedicated his Oscar in I think 84 to Nelson Mandela. But my God, just so simplistic to the point of being kind of offensive and a bit nauseating. It's got a memorable tune, which makes it worse. It just gnaws at your soul. And I think the problem with this is Paul McCartney's like one of the good guys. He's always got like that optimism in everything he does. That's kind of why the Beatles work, because like Lennon and George Harrison to a lesser extent could kind of balance that out. Stevie Wonder is just like an absolute all-time genius. Like his run in the 70s was incredible. I've read people say previously that like actually what stopped him really going to the absolute top was that he was slightly too optimistic and he didn't have that kind of grit, which I kind of disagree with. But I think here it's two optimists getting together and being like, you know, the keys on the piano, or piano as they keep singing it really infuriatingly, like maybe if we were just like this piano, the world would be a better place. And it's right up there with like McCartney's most sickly kind of songs. Like he's got so many of them. Like I love him dearly, but Jesus, because I think like the end point of this is Gal Gadot like sweetly singing Imagine with her celebrity mates. Do you know what I mean? So I think ultimately this did more musical harm than good for sure, although it did solve racism. So maybe I'm being harsh.
Yeah, Craig, come on. I mean, like, think about the implications there. Like, the incredibly harmonious, perfect world we live in, thanks to this wonderful piece of music. Incidentally, it is. I think we've just gone past the year anniversary of that Imagine thing, which has aged. Wow. Like milk, like probably like the absolute worst thing to happen in the last 12 months, which really is saying something. And yeah, this is a horrible song, and I will run away if someone plays it. At number 4 for me, back in the good land of good duets, it's this one.
Once upon a time, we're burning bright. All we ever seem to do is fight.
That's right, Curveball, number 4 for me. It's Coldplay and Rihanna, and the song is Princess of China. Am I saying this is a better song than Hunger Strike? Not necessarily, but I really do love it.
I think you are,
I think
Dave.
it's very, very underrated, this one. Yeah, every now and then, you know, despite my numerous, my endless supply of snark a bit music, I will somehow go to bat for Coldplay of all bands. I think they have a bunch of good songs, and this is absolutely one of them. It's funny, I was looking up the the kind of the details on this one, and like the opening line on the Wikipedia page is like, Princess of China is a duet recorded by British rock band Coldplay and Barbadian singer Rihanna. And it just made me realize that like,
factual,
but it's a decade of like tabloids like always following the word Barbadian with the word beauty. Like it's just completely burned into the Barbadian beauty. Like it's such a constant horrible thing that probably still, I would imagine, still exists in the pages of The Sun and various others. This was a song, it was a single as well on the 5th album of theirs called Milo Xylotto, and this was when Coldplay went all neon spray paint. Remember that? They just like spray painted everything, their clothes.
I do. It was not
piano,
a great idea.
It was everywhere.
Hate that era. Some good songs.
See, this is the thing, and this is kind of why I chose this. I actually kind of like this era of Coldplay. I think that album has some belters, and this is the standout one. But like, I think this is a wildly underrated banger. I think it's a great song. I think the ending of it in particular really, really gets me like on an emotional level. The kind of dual refrain of "You Really Hurt Me" and the fucking hammering of the piano keys. Like, it's a torch anthem. I think it's so well done. It's so simple. I think it's a really smart pop song. I think it doesn't get enough credit. It could have turned out extremely hollow and cash grabby. I mean, for example, Chris Martin and Coldplay teaming up with Beyonce on the horrible Hymn for the Weekend about 5 years later.
Oh.
I think on this one, though, Chris Martin and Rihanna complement each other really well. She sounds absolutely massive on this. It's more of her performance than his that stands out, which in the world of massive music industry ego, I like it. It feels like he played it smart and got out of her way. And every time she goes for it, it feels like a powerful light is kind of shining through. And like it is like a, you know, attractive feature, sell it as a single, but I do think there's more going on under the hood. And as for how it came together,
he does that quite well.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I mean, like, I don't like. I've never seen Coldplay live, and I hope I do someday because, as I always say, I hear it's a great show. I don't adore them. I don't know if I'll ever buy a vinyl, but I think when they're good, they're very, very good. And his earnestness works for me. I mean, come on, we're coming off the episode in which I said that Macklemore's Irish Celebration won me over.
Yeah.
And I also, sorry, a quick update, by the way, because a couple people did get on to me. When I was saying about Ireland's call on that episode, it's because I said like Aaron Levine was outlawed, the reason was, I was close. The reason was apparently that like Ulster players felt that it wasn't really appropriate, you know, for them to have, so they wanted something of more. Fair enough, but still a terrible song. This is a great song, though.
And also fuck rugby, kind of. Yeah.
I was gutted that Ireland won. Like, yeah, if anything, my disparaging.
Oh, dude, yeah. When I saw that score, I was like, I wasn't gutted, but a part of me was like,
I know. I was like, damn it, that's a pity. It would have been fun. But yeah, what can you do? All rugby fans cancelling the show immediately, I know. But
yeah, losing patrons.
What can I say? But no, this was written with Rihanna in mind. So unlike that time he wrote a song for Bowie and Bowie said no, she said yes. He talked about how he put it to her. He said, like, the album is designed as a whole piece. It has boy and girl lead characters, and top of our list was Rihanna. But it took a while to pick up the courage to ask her. We did a show in Las Vegas and I met her and I said, do you think there's any chance? I was very Hugh Grant-like and spluttering about it, which I can completely see. She said yes. Now, there's an interesting undercurrent here. And I love how, like, the actual full date is here, like it's a fucking, you know, FBI investigation. On the 21st of September 2011, reports surfaced online that Will Champion, who plays the drums in Coldplay, had expressed interest in singing the lyrics that were ultimately delegated to Rihanna. Chris Martin dispelled the suggestion that there's any tension between the bandmates and Rihanna, saying, there's a bit of a love story thread, so we really needed someone to sing higher than me. For all Will's good intentions, he can't do it. You need to be female.
Whoa, that's interesting.
There you go.
Yeah, I was racking my brains thinking of I nearly picked this for one of our top fives, and I was thinking, was it like weird collaborations? And I remembered it was actually our worst lyrics one. But in the end, I didn't include it, and there's some horrendous lyrics in this. I didn't include it because I like the song. I love the production on it. I think it's like a better version of Paradise, maybe. And yeah, the lyrics are weird, but weirdly it kind of works. It kind of hangs together all right. And maybe it's a Rihanna thing. Like, my favorite Rihanna song is probably Man Down, and those lyrics don't make any sense at points as well, but it kind of adds to the pop fun of it all. So yeah, I'll give it to you. All right, cool. My number 3 is an Encore News section mainstay. It's Dolly Parton, and she's teaming up with another all-American legend.
Kind of man, you're always raring to go,
Just taking it easy and taking it slow.
but taking it just as far as it wants to go.
Well, you're all I can handle, and that's saying a lot.
Well, you've got the handle that sure hits the spot.
And you've got just what it takes to take what I got, and we're just sweet loving friends. Just sweet loving friends.
Dolly Parton and Sly Stallone on Sweet Lovin' Friends. Sweet Lovin' Friends. That elongated, barely in tune sweet really starts to grade around chorus number 3.
You're not going to have a go at Rocky now, are you, Craig?
Shock horror, Rocky wasn't a singer, Dave. And this duet is just one of the many songs featured on the soundtrack to Rhinestone, which was a 1984 musical comedy film that Stallone was behind. He got Dolly Parton on board. It was a critical and financial failure, you'll be shocked to hear. Dolly Parton did have 2 hits on the album. They did not feature Stallone. And the poster for it's actually great. You've got like Dolly beating a shocked Stallone in an arm wrestle, which is like class. And the plot was like basically Dolly Parton's a country singer. She's trying to get out of her contract with her manager, so she bets she can like turn the next person she sees into like a Nashville crooner. And unfortunately, the next person is Sylvester Stallone, who's like this cocky, brash New York City cabbie. And basically, she takes him under her wing and like brings him to Tennessee and just like trains him in all things kind of country. Now this song is supposed to be post-transformation when he's good, but it doesn't really quite work. Stallone initially said, listen, the only fun I ever had on a movie set was with Dolly Parton on Rhinestone. It was great. But then he kind of went on to say, actually, creatively, it got away from me. The director was supposed to be Mike Nichols, but it went to a different dude. It was Bob Clark. And he's like, Bob was a nice guy, but the film went in a direction that literally shattered my internal core. And he was just like not having it. He said he regretted the entire film. Whitesnake were supposed to do songs. He wanted it to be edgier. I can only imagine what that would have been like. But there's like no chemistry. From all the reviews I'm seeing, there was no chemistry on screen. It translates to the soundtrack. They were fine though. Like Stallone had Rocky 4, I think, the next year. Dollywood opened a couple of years later. Everyone recovered.
The whole punk thing was kicking off. I can't believe.
I
can't believe that this is the only time he had fun on a set. What about Demolition Man? That looked like a bit of a laugh. No, I mean,
yeah. And he said that quote. Let me see. That quote was from 2006. Yeah. So Demolition Man was in the bag. I don't know. Maybe he's misremembering, but maybe he's just trying to find some solace from the whole sorry affair.
Possibly. Robbed of an Oscar, by the way, for Creed. Should have won. But, lots of injustices out there, this song being one of them. All right, let's go to 1998.
Misunderstood, 'cause I can't see how we could wanna change something that's so good. All my love was all it took. You need to live it up. Had about enough. It's not what you see. Boy is mine. I'm sorry that you seem to be confused.
The boy is mine, Craig. That's who the boy is. That's who he belongs to. Me.
You can have him.
It's Brandy and Monica. The Boy Is Mine from 1998. An incredible duet. So incredible that when Brandy put out an album and when Monica put out an album, this song was on both of them because it went to both of them. So the whole backstory here is that this song was written and it was supposed to be a solo song by Brandy, but she and her producers agreed that it would be better if it was a duet. They were inspired by Michael Jackson and your buddy Paul McCartney, their duet "The Girl Is Mine," and we're like,
which was the same year, I think, as Ebony and Ivory. So he got something right that year.
What a year! But this was 16 years later, of course. At the time, both Brandy and Monica were quite young. I think they were like 17, 18 perhaps. And this one was a huge success. I think it was the biggest selling single of that year. It was massive. It comes on now when you're flicking through the channels on a Saturday night and you're like, oh man, yes, this song fucking rules. It's great. Very of its time in the best possible way. The story goes that like when essentially like Brandy picked Monica, supposedly, and they had to like, record labels contact each other. It was all set up. It was going to happen. Apparently the first recording of this, in which they did record it together in the same place, was thrown out because it wasn't good enough. I don't know like what exactly went down, but Monica re-recorded her vocals elsewhere and then they stitched them together and you hear what you hear. Huge hit, like I say. There was a music video directed by Joseph Kahn, who went on to make lots of other videos and films and is Taylor Swift's best mate and chief propaganda expert, I believe, these days. The video includes the girls fighting over a guy. Do you know who it is? It's an actor. He's been in some stuff.
Let me think.
Very handsome man. Very attractive.
A very attractive
who would later
man.
go on to later on to co-star with Eminem in 8 Mile. It's Mekhi Phifer. So he's the object of their affections.
I don't remember the video.
Oh, a classic video. It's very like, again, of its time, like, clearly set in like a big apartment block, lots of primary colours. And at the end of it, he shows up and they both answer the door and he's screwed, man, because girl power wills out. It's actually very reminiscent of a horrendously bad song, comically unfunny. God, in the last 5 or 6 years, I think, maybe the last 10 years, called Same Girl by Usher and Ora Kelly, who, is a horrific human being. And that song is just outrageously bad. This is outrageously good, though. But I think it was a tough time for both Brandy and Monica. They were plagued by lots of tabloid rumours that they hated each other. Supposedly, one of the reasons Brandy wanted to do it with Monica was to try and quash all that. Said that they'd seen each other at award shows, never really hung out together. And if anything, this would help them, would help the image for both of them. That wasn't really the case. They were still plagued by rumours that they did, in fact, not like each other. There was talk that Brandy was really pissed off that Monica named her subsequent album The Boy Is Mine, the one that this one appears on her record. So all kinds of problems. And then back in 2012, Monica talked about it, said, "We were young, we could barely stay in the room with each other. By no means was it jealousy or envy. She and I are polar opposites, and instead of embracing that, we used our differences as reasons not to be amongst each other." So despite the unity on the song, it wasn't actually present in real life. But what a song it is, Craig.
Yeah, really like that. And it kind of makes you long for that 90s R&B. It was just so like lush and opulent sounding. And like, I love a lot of the R&B now, but it's just like, old man Craig here to talk about that stripped back Stark thing. Like sometimes you just need that big
music
production.
Of the time.
It still sounds great. Yeah. All right, my runner up for worst. Most damning indictment of this song is probably the fact that Catherine Zeta-Jones' kind of like sub Celine Dion delivery is not the worst thing about it by any means.
Why you and I will by and by no true love ways.
Sometimes we'll sigh, sometimes we'll cry, and we'll know why. Just you and I, no true love ways throughout.
Christ.
True Love Ways there, Catherine Zeta-Jones with David Essex. I don't know how up to speed you are with David Essex's career, Dave. Can maybe bring you up to speed.
Yeah,
I always thought he was
there,
like the kind of British version of Johnny Logan. Like he kind of operates in that terrain. Or maybe it's vice versa because I think he was big in the 70s, but apparently he was like huge. His Wikipedia, unless he wrote it himself, but there's references, talk about his pop idol looks, which gave him a strong female fan base, and his tours in Britain created scenes of hysteria reminiscent of Beatlemania. He was like voted #1 British male vocalist for a couple of years. He was a teen idol. I can't believe it because every David Essex song I've heard, I'm like, this man cannot sing. He's kind of like an Andrew Lloyd Webber version of a pop star. This was 1994. So, he was getting on in like teen idol stakes. Catherine Zeta-Jones was in her early 20s. Apparently they dated. And like, it's one of those things of like, I'm not sure if they were in some TV stuff together. I don't know if it's like, much like the press would love to kind of set, you know, female against female just for kind of the headlines. I guess back then a lot of it was like, oh, they're collaborating together, of course they're dating. But she was also linked with like John Leslie, Mick Hucknall. It was quite a list, so I don't know. Maybe you can slot him in there.
Just like
Who
pick
knows?
a fucking sleazeball there. Like, who else you got?
Yeah. And just 4 short years later, she'd be meeting Michael Douglas and leaving for Hollywood, and everything would be absolutely fine.
His films are very chaste. I don't know what you're talking about.
Do you know what his pickup line to her was, apparently?
I'm Michael Douglas. Hello.
No, he said, I'd like to father your children. Still married, folks, and they have those children, still happily married, and very happy for them.
Can you imagine, like, in the workman's, when this is all over? Dave, she's really attractive. Go over and talk to her. Oh, I can't, Craig. No, okay, I will.
What
Hello.
will I say?
Hi, how's it
Let's
going?
talk about, want to settle down.
I'd like to father your children.
Oh.
Fuck, security, like, that is
disgusting. This song is
horrific.
disgusting. Back to the content. The fact this is from 1994 is crazy, right? Because it does sound like one of those horrible 80s productions where they're covering a 50s song, but it sounds more dated than the original because it's just horribly done. It sounds like the platonic kind of ideal of a chart topper for Simon Cowell. Like Robson and Jerome, I think, did Unchained Melody like a year later, and this kind of like, this is very much in the same ballpark. Old-timey 50 song, just kind of granny music, shit plastic production, Butlin's quality vocal performances.
And something for the dads in Catherine Zeta-Jones. Yeah, very much.
Like her performance is fine. It's just way over the top because like it doesn't mesh with his energy, shall we say, whatsoever, and horrendous.
The music is horrific. That kind of like boom thing is just really upsetting.
Yeah, it's very. Catherine got over it. I don't know what happened to date. Go on, what are you gonna say?
It's very Alan's Deep Bath. Like, I don't like it.
It totally
at all.
is. Yeah. It's like aiming for sultry, but it's just like sultry in like a kind of a fucking motel somewhere. I don't know what became of David Essex. I'd imagine he's like perpetually like on a kind of breakfast morning couch talking to Eamon Holmes about his like upcoming theatre performance. I don't know.
Yeah,
I wish
which
the best
is
from
a
this
one-man
is not the
show
best.
called What Became of David Essex. All right, number 2 for me. How about, we'll keep it sultry, I suppose. Here's a beautiful song about murder most foul.
Last thing I heard was a muttered word as he knelt above me with a rock in his fist.
On the last day I took her where the wild roses grow. She lay on the bank, the wind lied as a thief, and I kissed her goodbye, said all beauty must die. And I leant down and planted a rose between her.
Yes, indeed. It is, of course, Nick Cave and Kylie Minogue. The song is Where the Wild Roses Grow, a murder ballad on a Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds record called Murder Ballads in 1996. And it's incredible. It's kind of one of those ones where it's like, oh yeah, like, how could you do a top 5 duet to not include this one? It's exceptional. And we're fans of both Nick Cave and Kylie Minogue on this show, as recent episodes will attest to. And again, I think this one handily dispels the myth that Kylie Minogue was, some kind of just nothing pop star for a long time. This is from the mid-90s, was before her kind of reascension, but proof positive that she is a force to be reckoned with. Nick Cave describes writing the song, which is itself inspired by a traditional song called Down in the Willow Garden, which is a tale of a man courting a woman and killing her while they're out together. Horrible subject matter, of course. But this is Nick Cave territory when it comes to the macabre of music, and again, somehow finds the beauty in it. He describes writing the song and says, it was written very much with Kylie Minogue in mind. I wanted to write a song for her for many years. I had a quiet obsession with her for about 6 years. I wrote several songs for her, none of which I felt was appropriate to give to her. It was only when I wrote this song, which is a dialogue between a killer, it's very dodgy, a dialogue between a killer and his victim, that I thought I'd finally written the right song for her to sing. I sent it to her and she replied the next day, saying yes, it seems. He sent the song with a different singer on it, singing her lines to her parents' house because she was staying there at the time. Again, all of this sounds so horrible and sinister, and I guess this is the case of like, you're very much stretching the concept of art. And of course, for anyone who's never heard the song before, again, you feel like you have to boilerplate stress it out that like, in no way do we condone the actions of the characters in this music, but like, this is the world that Nick Cave is often drawn to. It often has horrible stuff happening in it. And I think if anyone's going to do it, at least it's done with a sense of, kind of poetry and incredible grace. And the vocals by both performers are absolutely fantastic. The arrangement is fucking beautiful. It's an amazing song. I think I remember the video causing some controversy at the time as well.
Yeah, I remember that video for sure.
Yeah, tell the listener about it, Craig.
Basically, Nick just does Kylie in, essentially. It plays out the song. It's just obviously such a graphic kind of depiction, and it's quite visceral, and it's a murder ballad. But it's artfully shot. It's a really good piece of work, I think.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's tough to be it's really tricky. I think it exists in its own world. there was never a point when I was picking this, until right now when I'm talking about it, that I was like, is this really inappropriate to have a song about a man murdering a woman? Particularly, when you take recent news stories into account and everything. In no way do we mean to diminish anything like that. And I'm getting a bit tongue-tied talking about it, but for me, it's always just been an incredible song. It's always been an incredible example of the dark parts of art, and the fact that, you even have a genre called murder ballads.
Yeah.
I don't know. Am I out on a limb here, Craig, or is...
it's pretty apparent that this song was never meant to be a celebration, and it's, that Nick Cave goes back to quite a lot, but everything I've seen him kind of write and talk about, he's just, horrified every time he does. But I think it's kind of a necessary thing to get out there in art, far better out than in terms of art. And yeah, it's so well produced. The performances are spot on. Kylie was clearly searching for a new direction. In the 90s she had, what people, again, the press probably joked at the time that she was going through an indie phase, but she was like a, seeker. She was looking for something that would suit her. It was a great collaboration. 2 Australian icons, and from there, she kind of skyrocketed again. She found her voice, she found her place, and it's great to have both of them. Good choice. Okay, my number 1. Right, I ended up steering clear of posthumous covers because there's, they're always a bit creepy. Speaking of, usually just clumsily done, and there's so many of them, so I didn't really go there. My number 1 is far creepier, precisely because it sounds like a posthumous collaboration, despite the fact that both singers were alive when it was recorded.
I tried to resist, well, baby, I know so well that I've got you under my skin. I would sacrifice anything, come what might, for the sake of holding you near, in spite of a warning voice. Comes in the night, it repeats and shouts in my ear. Don't you know, blue eyes?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, Bono there with old blue eyes. Frank Sinatra. And Cole Porter's Timeless. I've got you under my skin there. So last week we had a bigging up of Bono and U2. I love U2. I don't hate Bono. So much of what, people hate about Bono, though, I recognise in this song. I think he's overextending himself. He's going, of course I can be the cool crooner. He's clearly aching to be hanging out with the Rat Pack. It's just quite a weird, slimy vocal delivery. He's kind of ingratiating himself with, American culture and celebrity. And he's clearly singing this to Frank, his big hero. It gets a bit like Talented Mr. Ripley, right? He wants to get Frank under his skin. And this was 90s when he starts doing all these profound homages to America. You had the, Elvis ate America before America ate him. And he's writing poetry in the New York Times, and he did a couple of years ago, he wrote a column for the New York Times where he was talking about Sinatra, and they actually struck up a bit of a friendship. And he was speaking about how Sinatra says to him, I don't usually hang around with men who wear earrings, and Bono's dining out on this. He's like, oh yeah, but actually he was great, and blah blah blah. And he ends up talking about a time he started a sing-song of My Way in a pub in Dublin, just as the recession hit, like 2008-ish. And he's like, the song brought everyone together and helped distract them from the economic gloom. Can you imagine when the fucking world, like the banking system collapsed, you're in Dublin and like the Celtic Tiger is fucked, and Bono's like, it's alright lads, come on, I did it all. He just like breaks into My Way.
I can imagine it, yeah.
Oh my God.
Guarantee it. Gavin Friday on the keys, presumably in the corner.
Yeah. This is like the best example of his like monumental hobnobbing. And I will say the way this was recorded was it was an electronically assembled duet. So Sinatra was doing this duets album where he specified that he didn't want to have to be with the people that were going to be on the album. So he recorded his parts. They were all just songs he'd previously done. He's kind of phoning it in. And then the artists had to record their stuff kind of reacting to what he'd done. And you can hear Bono reacting. And my God.
I've no problems with this selection. I'm surprised that your top 5 has gone by and that Tom Jones didn't feature at any point. I really thought he'd be in there for sure. You know, remember he went through a phase there around the early 2000s where everything he did was a duet for a while.
Keris Matthews, and yeah, the Stereophonics one was there for me as well.
Cardigans,
a lot of cringy videos.
Burn Down the House.
Yeah.
Hold
yeah.
tight. All that kind of stuff, you know.
But you know what I think it was? Like, I think all those covers had the inherent Tom Jones showmanship and cheesiness where you can never really take him seriously anyway. So, like, a duet doesn't, you know, ruin him really.
Sex Bomb, Craig?
It's
I don't know.
Okay, Sex Bomb.
Was that a duet, though? I don't know if it's a duet. It was with Moose
That was all
T.
him, maybe, I think.
That song. I tell you.
But something like this is so self-serious, and Bono is just, like, clearly trying to, like... I don't know. Like, I think around that time as well, he did this whole, like, he gave the Lifetime Achievement Award to Frank Sinatra at the Grammys, and he did this, like, 10-minute long speech where it's just, like, full of Bonoisms, and let me hold on a sec. I
just
think
10 minutes, really. Brevity.
I'll tell you how it ended, right? All right, this is how it ends. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready to welcome a man heavier than the Empire State, more connected than the Twin Towers, not anymore, as recognizable as the Statue of Liberty and living proof that God is a Catholic? Will you welcome the King of New York City, Francis Albert Sinatra? And then Frank Sinatra comes out and he's like, just completely like emotionless, right? To begin with. And Bono puts a cigar back in his mouth to kind of greet Frank, to be like, yeah, I've got the cigar, Frank. And it's like, fucking hell. It's just fucking hell.
This is outrageous. I can't stop thinking about... Yeah, you've said enough. I can't stop thinking about Tom Jones, though. If we found ourselves like on the eve of the pandemic and we had like the opportunity for me to recreate the Bono thing, I'd probably go with Sex Bomb by Tom Jones, you know, because it's just an outrageous, terrible song. He's not in my number one, though. Okay. I feel like Craig will probably be able to guess what my number one is. I think it may have featured on a previous top 5, and for me, it's just like a list like this begins and ends with it. But listener, in case you're not sure what I'm about to throw to, I want you to picture you're at your 10-year high school reunion. You're looking good. It's a stressful evening. There's people out to get you in all kinds of ways. You're wearing a beautiful black suit. You're John Cusack. You're staring into the eyes of a baby, and you now have a bit of a new outlook on life. Just unbelievable. It's Under Pressure by Queen and David Bowie, of course. I'm usually kind of harping on that Craig picks Bowie too much, so I've picked him this week. Just an outstanding, perfect song. The film I was referencing there, of course, was Grosse Pointe Blank, which I actually rewatched this week.
Watched it last Friday.
Did you? I watched it yesterday.
Just on a whim.
Doing this list brought me back to it. Now, it's a film I've seen many, many times, and I haven't seen it in a long time. I was worried maybe it didn't hold up. Nope, it holds up. I think it's a 5-star classic, and that whole
one of the
sequence,
best scripts of all time.
It's just tremendous. That whole sequence is amazing. Check it out if you never have. Incredible dark comedy, done so well. And yeah, I mean, you know, that punk's either in love with that guy's daughter or he has a newfound respect for life, which is how you would feel if you had that moment when this song was crashing down and you realised that maybe it was time to stop killing people and maybe start living a bit more. I've never killed someone though, so, you know, I don't know. But moving on.
Glad we got that clarification.
Song-wise, Under Pressure. What more can you say? Titans coming together. I guess almost like the Temple of the Dog situation, this was kind of an accident as well. Do you know the whole background to this one, Craig?
I'm not sure I know the whole background. Did Bowie stumble into a studio and they were just there?
That's apparently what, it's been described as the notorious session Freddie Mercury and David Bowie shared before, during and after the recording of Queen's iconic hit will go down in history. It may also be the reason for the shared intensity of the track. According to this description from a website I can't remember that I took it from, Bowie happened to be recording an LP around the corner from Queen's studio when he stumbled in and ended up challenging Mercury to a sing-off. This could be very apocryphal, but I'd like to think it's true. What transpired thereafter turned into one of Bowie's finest tracks and one of Queen's undying anthems. Fueled by cocaine, wine and a hefty dose of big bruising ego, Bowie and Freddie Mercury went toe-to-toe on this track and somehow both came out as champions. That's straight off like VH1, isn't it? Some kind of countdown. But yeah, apparently Queen were working on a song called Feel Like, but didn't like it. Bowie had originally gone to Mountain Studios to sing backing vocals on another Queen song called Cool Cat, but his vocals were removed from the final song because he didn't like it either. So, you know, is it ever going to happen for these guys? Are they ever going to come together? Well, they did. And apparently it was kind of like, you know, a game of one-upmanship and see who could outdo each other. That section I played there, it tells you where we stand on it, because I think that Bowie closer is just up there with
steals the show,
the best thing he's ever done. I mean, I think it's just absolutely incredible. Here's a quote, though, from Never Bitter Brian May, back speaking to Mojo magazine in October 2008. It was hard, because you'd four very precocious boys, and David, who was precocious enough for all of us. He took over the song lyrically. Looking back, it's a great song, but it should have been mixed differently. Freddie and David had a fierce battle over that. It's a significant song because of David and its lyrical content. Wah, wah, wah. It's amazing. Get over it, Brian May. So there's all kinds of stuff like who wrote the riff, like their bass player John Deacon, is that who that is? Or
yeah, John Deacon. Yeah,
apparently they went out for dinner and he came back and he'd forgotten the riff and Roger Taylor remembered it, and it's like, oh, why wasn't any of this in Bohemian Rhapsody? That would have been slightly better. Incredible. I don't think they ever performed it live, even though like they both played Live Aid like one after the other and didn't team up.
Probably not.
There's like a video, but like the video is like a splice thing and it makes it look like they're performing it live, but I don't think it's actually, I could be wrong on this, but I don't know if they ever performed it live. However, an inspirational song to say the least, and one man in particular who very much was inspired by it was of course our old friend Vanilla Ice, who sampled the iconic bass line for his 1990 single.
He didn't sample it, it's completely different according to Vanilla Ice.
Well, this is the thing, he denied the accusation of doing so. Said he had modified it but did not pay any songwriting credit or royalties to Queen and David Bowie. A lawsuit resulted in Bowie and all members of Queen teaming up, receiving songwriting credit for the sample. Vanilla Ice later claimed that he purchased the publishing rights, saying that buying the song made more financial sense than paying out royalties, but a Queen spokesperson said that statement was inaccurate.
I'm shocked. I'm for one shocked. Yeah, when you mention like the mixing there and performance videos and stuff, this is like one of those prime songs for the old vocals only treatment on YouTube. Like people love doing that, particularly with the Beach Boys, but particularly with this song. And then all the comments are just like middle-aged folks being like, you can keep your auto-tune and blah blah blah, this is real vocals, yeah Freddie, yeah. And it is in fairness like remarkable what Freddie Mercury could do. It's just amazing. Technically, but it's an
amazing song. I will say that like in closing I'll say that like I never get sick of hearing it. It always puts me in a good mood. And that bit in particular, the big Bowie ending, is just fucking lightning in a bottle. So yeah, number one all day.
Beautiful. I'm not going to argue with that. Fantastic.
Do you have a number one, Craig?
I didn't really give it too much consideration. This would be top 5 for me. I would probably go for like a Craig staple like Kate Bush and Peter Gabriel, maybe Don't Give Up. I do love the Strokes when they teamed up with Regina Spektor.
You're a big fan of that one, yes.
Yeah, Modern Girls and Old Fashioned Men. I think it was in my top 10 when we talked about the Strokes.
Great song.
Kind of primer on those. And yeah, I love that one. So, but I like all your picks. Very good.
Thanks, man. This episode of No Encore was engineered by our wonderful sonic architect, Adam Shanahan. So, as noted at the top of the show, plenty happening next week on the show, or in the week that you listen to this if you let the weekend go by. Monday, No Aux Chord, exclusively for patrons. So patreon.com/No Encore if you want to get that bonus episode. Wednesday, track by track, sit-down interview with Micheál Quinn. And then next Friday, back at it. Another No Encore. In between, do check us out. Check out that For Those Who Love album, and we'll be back quite soon. My name is Dave Hanreddy. His name is Craig Fitzpatrick. This has been No Encore. There will be no encore. Take care.
This show is part of the Head Stuff Podcast Network, a hub for the creative and the curious. Shows are produced in association with Head Stuff and the Podcast Studios Dublin. Find out more or become a member at headstuffpodcasts.com.